I must admit, the last 7 weeks have somehow simultaneously been the slowest and fastest that I've ever experienced. It was long because waiting for each episode every 7 days was almost as long as the 5 days of the week it took to get to the weekend back when I was in primary school. Almost. But it's also been pretty fast because of the pressure of trying to condense my varied and extensive thoughts into one comprehensible video in under a week's time, despite my upload library being the extent of my editing experience. But alas, we made it to The Last of Us Season 2 finale, and we're back in Seattle, so I can finally do the intro one last time. If you've been watching my videos for the beginning, you'll know that my biggest issue throughout this season has been how short and awkwardly paced it's felt, relative to the amount of stuff that's in it, that is. I did say a few weeks back that I felt like the first 4 episodes were really well paced, but that was with the caveat if this was a season with like 9 or 10 episodes. But it wasn't. There was only 3 episodes remaining, one of which was most definitely going to be a flashback episode, leaving me with the lingering thought that Ellie's descent into darkness was going to feel like it was going to have to be speedran quite a bit. And that's pretty much what has occurred, which has left me with more or less the same takeaway that I had from Arcane Season 2, which is I like pretty much everything that's been done here, but a lot of it doesn't really get a chance to marinate and sit with you as much as it should, and it results in you not feeling the full effect of what's trying to be conveyed. Now maybe that's not a fair comparison because Arcane Season 2 was a final season and a complete narrative that just felt far too condensed, whereas this is an incomplete narrative with intentions of continuing and elaborating on stuff. But the season on its own, I think the issue still remains. Take this moment for instance where Ellie returns to the theatre and has a moment with Adina where she takes off her top to reveal that she's covered in cuts and bruises. Now this is a good moment because it's a visual reminder that Ellie isn't this infallible machine and is just putting herself through so much physical as well as mental torment in her pursuit of vengeance. And there are numerous instances that you can point to as being the cause of this, such as the stalker attack and escaping the scars. However, the problem is, it doesn't quite feel like that's what's happened up to this point. In the game, when Ellie removes her top and you see the damage that's been done to her, it feels more correct, because even if you are good enough at the game to get through every encounter completely unscathed, there are still these unavoidable instances where Ellie takes damage, gets hurt, fucks up royally and gets herself into some serious shtick. Whereas here in the show, it doesn't feel like this sort of physical toll has occurred up to this point, at least to this degree. Now look, I'm not saying that we need to see Ellie get brutalized every episode or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all, because I don't necessarily want to see that. But if you're going to make the point through visual storytelling that Ellie is damaging herself both mentally and physically on this path, we kind of need to see her dealing with more physical obstacles so we can really feel the effects of this when we see it up close. And it doesn't help that almost every instance where it looks like we might see some of that, it just gets completely bypassed. And again, I've said this before, you don't need to make Ellie a killing machine like she is in the game in order to convey this. That is clearly what they were trying to avoid with this version of things, making Ellie come across like a real hard arse or something like that. Pardon my intrusion, but while I was editing this, I actually decided to look over some of the trailers for Season 2, and I saw a shot in one of the trailers of what appears to be Ellie wielding a fucking M16. I don't remember seeing that at all in Season 2. So what the fuck, Neil and Craig? An M16 is not part of Ellie's arsenal when she goes to Seattle, so this means one of two things. One, she found a M16 at some point and is just rapid firing it for no reason, which alright, fair enough, I'd probably do that as well. Or, she killed a guy, took his M16 and is trying to murder a bunch of his mates with it, so that's interesting. Jokes aside, I do think this is a pretty strong indicator that at some point there was more instances of Ellie committing violent acts in this season, which have, for whatever reason, been trimmed out. Don't know why, just thought it was interesting to point out. I'll fuck off now. Because I think a lot of people, I will admit, misinterpret Ellie from the game as just being this hard arse killer, and I understand why you would, because on the surface she does look like a bit of a badass because you can play her like one. But when you dig a little deeper and you look at the dangerous situations she's constantly getting into, it's not really the case. No matter how much Ellie thinks she can control and handle these situations, she really can't. She's good at surviving them and getting out of them, but only with the most extreme form of violence possible, which eventually starts to catch up with her when the manner in which she uses violence and who she's using it against becomes less and less justifiable. Now, maybe that does lend some credence to the whole ludonarrative dissonance debate with regards to the game story. Me personally, I've never really had that problem, and I might touch on that in a future Last of Us video that I may or may not make at some point. But I do think that the earlier episodes of this season needed to give Ellie at least one more physical encounter to overcome that gives her a sense of power, even if it's a delusional one. And that's what keeps her driving forward. Actually, now that I think about it, do you know what this season's missing? Jordan. Jordan's a character from the game who has been omitted from the series. He was another member of Abby's crew when Joel was killed, and he is the first of the group that Ellie crosses paths with when she gets to Seattle. Initially, I wasn't really bothered by his omission, but looking back, I think Seattle Day 1 really could have used a moment like this. I think Ellie needs at least one recognizable, really personal, vengeful kill when she gets to Seattle before we get to her torturing Nora. Yes, she does kill that guy in episode 4, but a death like that means nothing in the world of The Last of Us. This guy was an NPC who was going to kill you otherwise. No one cares about him unless you're part of his tribe. Whereas having something more personal, like the guy who was giving you a kicking while your dad was being brutally murdered in front of you, that's a much different story, and he was going to harm someone else that she cares about as well, so she feels perfectly justified in killing him. This is the type of violence that Ellie is capable of committing, pure, raw, survival-based necessity. But then you get to the Nora situation, where the method of violence changes from justifiable defense to active torture, which requires a very different kind of soul, because as we all know, torture is for the torturer, or the guy giving the orders to the torturer. You torture for the good times. We should all admit that. It's useless as a means of getting information. Sometimes you torture for the torturee, but only if they're prepared to pay. This is the point that the violent acts that Ellie's committing start to take a toll on her, because now it feels different. This was a woman who was already going to die, and Ellie makes an active effort to make it as painful as possible. Joel was able to torture people callously because he was able to distance himself from it and view it more pragmatically, but Ellie isn't. The Owen and Mel situation, I think, is done extremely well in this version of things. As opposed to the game where Mel actually attacks Ellie after Ellie shoots Owen, in this instance, she is completely passive as Ellie's bullet goes straight through Owen's throat and just hits Mel right in the jugular. Again, another instance where Ellie thinks she has control of a situation, but just doesn't. It's even more tragic in this instance because Ellie can't even make the self-defense justification. Ellie just looks so broken and barely capable of holding her shit together while looking at these two. In the game, she enters the room more overconfidently, doing her best to emulate Joel's attitude before things get out of hand. But here it just feels more like pain and sadness. She's already on the verge of tears when she enters the room, and the absolutely heartbreaking nature of Mel with her last few firing neurons just begging the person who just killed her to try and save her baby by giving her a C-section is a fucking sadistic inclusion here. Even if I wasn't responsible for this woman's death, I think I would be mentally paralysed for life if I found myself in this situation. Also, am I the only one who thinks that the actor for Mel, Ariella Barrer, looks a bit like Ella Purnell? Is that just me? Much like what they did with Joel back in season 1, Ellie this season isn't an emulation of her game counterpart. She's not the nasty, nimble neck stabber that she is in the game. She's an emotionally driven, woefully reckless, grieving trauma victim who thinks she can be an efficient, vengeful killer, but she's not. She's not emotionally built for it, and the odds are too stacked against her to be physically either. Especially in this fucking shithole of a city. No disrespect to Seattle. I'm sure it's a lovely place IRL. And of course, these changes to these characters is not going to be for everybody, and that's fine. And look, I'll admit it, I prefer the approach that the games took, but I do still like and respect this approach to things. But I don't think it would have diminished any of this by showing the struggle that Ellie has to go through and the violent acts she has to commit to reach her end goal. I do like this new addition of Ellie confessing the full truth to Dina about the Joel and Abby situation, because I was wondering in the last couple of episodes, now that the pregnancy isn't the thing that creates a bit of a dark cloud over their relationship in Seattle, what could be? And I think this is a great way of doing it, because Dina gave Ellie the whole "I'm with you no matter what" speech back in episode 5, saying that it doesn't matter what Joel did to them, I'm on your side. But in hearing the actual truth, it's like, oh, alright, I need a minute. Maybe we should reconsider the situation. But once again, the issue is this is the final episode, and because this has to get to a lot of places very quickly, we don't get a chance to let this marinate very much and explore that bombshell from either Ellie or Dina's perspective. And I'll say this again, I don't think the problem here is the focus on their relationship. I actually like that as an overarching point for this side of the story. After losing somebody that she loves, Ellie begins developing a romantic relationship with Dina that blossoms while they're in Seattle, but then it becomes more of a problem and starts to quickly fall apart when Ellie has to struggle with what she thinks is more important. She wants to prioritize her relationship with Dina, but she also feels like she's somehow dishonoring Joel if she doesn't avenge his death. Problem is, while I think the first half of that is done really well, I think the second half barely gets a chance to show itself. They don't even bring back what could have been a really powerful narrative device that they established at the beginning of Ellie having really debilitating PTSD episodes of Joel's death. I'm not saying you need to beat the audience over the head with this, but you could have used it once or twice to remind the audience this is what's plaguing Ellie, even in her seemingly happier moments. This whole season really does have a momentum problem, where I think the first 2 episodes do a phenomenal job at building momentum, having the big explosion at the end, and then dying things down a little bit. Then the next 3 episodes rebuilds momentum, only for it to completely drop, with episode 6 being a flashback episode, and then the final episode not only has to rebuild momentum, but bring back together so many angles before concluding on a massive cliffhanger. It just doesn't flow very well. A lot more time was needed before and after episode 6 in order for this to flow properly. I really do think that day 2 Seattle could have done with being longer. Day 2, a lot of stuff happens that is just not here. And there's even this really fascinating unseen storyline that you come across in day 2 that I was really hoping would get some rep in this season, but apparently no. And I know the easy solution is to just say, this season needed more episodes, but I didn't know what the circumstances are here. Maybe for whatever reason they could only have 7 episodes. Maybe it was a budget thing. Maybe it was a HBO thing. Apparently they've been requesting lesser episodes in their TV properties as of late, so maybe that had something to do with it. But if you only had 7 episodes, I think it may have benefited the season to just laser focus on Ellie and Dina's perspective. Like I said in an earlier video, I think the Wolf and Scar stuff could have been dialed back, so this season could be exclusively from the perspective of the Jackson side of things. So Ellie, Dina, Tommy, Jesse. I've come to terms with the change that they've made to Tommy's story in this. It's the reason that he has a son in this version, so he would be less inclined to go on a revenge quest. And again, I do prefer the approach from the game, but they've clearly made that decision for this side of things, and I respect that. So his main thing here is a rescue mission to save what is ostensibly his niece. But if that is to be his purpose in this version, it would still be nice to get a bit of perspective from him. Maybe see how he and Jesse work as a unit while searching Seattle, so that way the season could have 2 main perspectives that would be consistent from beginning to end. Getting a lot of perspective on the wolves and scars doesn't really feel like it has much purpose or weight for this season. And what is shown here, even though I think it's all good stuff, as I've said before, Jeffrey Wright can do no wrong, but by the end it just leaves a lot to be desired, and you know it isn't even going to get any sort of elaboration until the following season. And again, if you only had 7 episodes, it might as well have not been touched upon until then. Speaking of which, there's this very strange moment where Ellie, on her way to the aquarium, gets washed up on Scar Island and almost gets gutted. And I find this interesting because, well, firstly, this is apparently a scrapped idea for the game where Ellie would wind up on the island, but they decided to cut it for pacing reasons. Now, the reason I do find this interesting is because, and this is a minor spoiler for the game, I suppose, but I don't think it ruins anything, but at this point in the story, Abby is on this island. Like, day 3 Seattle, Abby is on this island at this point. So I find it interesting that without knowing it, Ellie is actually, pushed closer towards Abby and just never knows it. And this is just speculation, but I think when they get to season 3, they might have the noise that the scars here be caused by Abby somehow. So in some bizarre twist of fate, Ellie is indirectly saved by Abby in this moment. I think that's quite interesting. Also, that boat that she gets on at the end is most definitely Abby's boat. That being said though, the rate at which this scene comes and immediately goes is almost to a comedic level. Ellie literally gets washed ashore, spotted, picked up, noosed, they hear commotion, they drop her, they leave, she gets on the boat and gets back on track. It's baffling. When this happened, I was thinking, is this going to be an instance where we see Ellie forced to commit a really desperate act of violence in order to escape a situation? I thought maybe the noise was going to be just enough of a distraction that she could free herself and reach her knife so she can kill one or two of the scars, but no, they just leave and let her go, which I just don't think they would do. I mean, yes, their village is being attacked, but as far as they're concerned, she's part of this attack. So why wouldn't they just kill her then and there? It's really bizarre. The only thing I can think of is that it's supposed to serve to show that Ellie is in a situation where, if not for her immunity, others helping her, or pure luck, she would be dead. But we've seen that multiple times at this point. Back in season 1, we saw just how vicious and feral Ellie can get when she's under threat of death, especially for people. So I think this could have been a really good moment to remind you of that. But apparently not. Like, also, I feel like just the concept in general of Ellie being stuck on Scar Island is a whole concept in and of itself, which, if you're not going to commit to that, you might as well just not have it there. If I've sounded overly negative in this video, that's actually not my big takeaway, because there is still a lot of stuff that I really liked in this episode. I love Ellie and Jesse's confrontation back and forth and Ellie's big outburst. I like Jesse in general, how they've given him a bit more depth in this series. As usual, show looks incredible. This fucking ocean storm is what the coolest nightmares look like. I like the little bits of foreshadowing to the events of season 3, like the sky bridges and the rope burn around Abby's neck. The more I actually see of Caitlin Dever as Abby, the more I'm looking forward to seeing her in season 3. As mentioned, the Owen and Mel scene is just devastatingly dark and so well performed by everybody involved. Fucking hell, everybody's great in this series. And yes, I'll keep saying it, that includes Bella Ramsey. I do not know what is wrong with people. Like, seriously, did Nay Cunt learn anything for the Laura Bailey situation? How fucking bizarre is that? When The Last of Us 2 came out, it was the character Abby that people wouldn't stop whinging about and gave the actor abuse for. Now here we are, 5 years later, and it's Ellie everybody's moaning about and giving Bella Ramsey shite for. I remember hearing some light complaining back when season 1 came out, but no to this fucking deafening magnitude. Seriously, navigating the discourse of this season in search of some genuinely level-headed critiques that don't just resort to childish bad faith squalling has been a fucking task. Look, regardless of my feelings on this series, positive or negative, the game still exists. I'm always going to prefer their presentation of this story, and I've felt that way about Part 2 since I first played it back when it got released. I've been defending that game since day one. Both games are just so special to me for different reasons, flaws and all. But I do still find this show fascinating to dissect and discuss. I mean, when you get a chance to actually discuss it through all the fucking noise. I still feel the reverence that's clearly been put into this series by everybody involved. There's no shortage of things to like in it, and I'm still really looking forward to season 3, even if it's going to take another 2 fucking year to come out. Seriously though, if this season was going to be so short, they really should have considered filming seasons 2 and 3 back to back and released them a few months apart. Kind of like how Squid Game's doing it. And I'm being fair here, I'm trying to just think about others' sake, alright? Because I'm fine. I've played this game, alright? I know the story and its conclusion. But what about the poor bastards who aren't familiar with the source material? Look, if your only option is to split the story of The Last of Us Part 2 into 2 seasons, the most logical breaking point between seasons is obviously the perspective shift from Ellie to Abby. But fucking hell, is that a cruel place to leave things for the more uninitiated audiences? I mean, look, TV has done this sort of thing for decades, alright? So it's nothing new for a season of television to end on a fucking mental cliffhanger. But we also live in a time now where TV shows take a minimum of like 2 years to follow up their season. A year was bad enough for people in the days of The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, but this is getting ridiculous. I think having a season this short only to end on an insane cliffhanger, leaving almost everything without payoff, and then to ask audiences to wait almost 2 years before getting any follow-up is pretty fucking egregious. Look, I could talk forever about my issue with the release schedules of TV properties, but that's a whole other video for a whole other day. For now though, I will say I actually did have fun putting these together each week. It wasn't easy, but it was a fun challenge, and this most definitely will not be the last time that I talk about The Last of Us. I've had thoughts on these games just building and building ever since 2014, and these videos are probably just a fraction of them. I don't know when I'll get to it, but until then, well, guess it's time to play the game.
It's all about the game, and how you play it. All about control, and if you can take it. All about your debt, and if you can pay it. It's all about pain, and who's gonna make it? I am the game, you don't wanna play me. I am control, no way you can shake me. I am heavy debt, no way you can pay me. I am the
Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Mercy. And maybe I seem a bit confused. Yeah, maybe, but I got you pegged. But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Scrambled eggs all over my face. What is a boy to do?